Hi everyone, hi, I'm Jacob Payne from SNS. Thanks for joining us for the CXO Society show. Joining me today is Chris Hafner, Strategy and Transformation Advisor from SNS, and Daksh Gupta, who is Group CEO of Marshall Motor Holdings. Hey Dash, did you want to do an intro?
Hi everybody, and thanks for having me on the show, Jacob, and looking forward to this. So yeah, as you said, I'm Daksh Gupta. I'm Group CEO for Marshall Motor Holdings PLC. We're a publicly listed automotive retailer. Revenues heading towards 3 billion. We have 134 businesses. I've got to remember because we just bought 2 more yesterday. So 134 businesses representing 22 brand partners. We're big with a number of those key brands. So number 1 in the UK for VW Group, number 1 in the UK for VW themselves, big with Audi, number 1 for Skoda, big with Volvo, big with Jaguar Land Rover, big with Mercedes. I won't rattle them all off, but I think you get a sense of what we do. We've got about 4,000 people in the organisation. So that's us. And that's me. That's what we do. And I should say it's a role that I've been CEO since 2008, so I'm in year 14 now. So that's me.
Thanks, Dash. And Chris, did you want to do a quick intro as well?
Sure, Chris Hafner, Strategy and Transformation Advisor, and my background, I've worked in industry, I worked in venture capital, had an entrepreneurial itch in 2008, spun up 2 technology-based businesses, sold those in 2013. And I've had the great pleasure of working with a variety of organizations across the globe on, defining a strong sense of purpose, a vision, strategy, and a transformation roadmap, and worked with a variety of leaders of nations, of nonprofits, and for-profit organizations. And looking forward to today's conversation.
Thanks, Chris. And Dash, I'm going to put it back to you. I think today's conversation is all around looking at the industry, some of the market movers and the industry shakers that are existing at the moment. And Marshall, who most people might traditionally think as an in-person automotive sales business, posted some very strong AGM results. Have you got anything to sort of comment on that the other day?
Yeah, so we posted sort of trading update in line with our AGM, which a lot of PLCs sort of generally do put sort of statement along with their AGM announcements. So we basically said we'd had a really strong start to the year. Obviously, we announced our results in the 9th of March. So we had, despite the pandemic, we actually made £21 million worth of PBT, and which was ahead of our original consensus going into 2020. So that was quite some feat, quite frankly. Obviously, we do recognise we had significant government support, like a lot of companies did, but our feet are very firmly on the ground about that. But certainly the start of the year this year has been phenomenal. Considering our operations have been shut from the 4th of January through till the 12th of April, we posted the fact that our operational KPIs were strong. Just to give you a sort of sense of that, the market overall in the UK was up 8.4%, but clearly flattered by the fact that it was having softer comparisons given the fact that there was lockdown last year. So whilst the market was up 8.4% on new, Marshall was up 19.5%. So a strong double-digit market outperformance there. And if you look at used cars, our used car performance was equally strong. So to the end of April, we were up 42%. Again, clearly flattered by the lockdown. But if you were to look at sort of a reference point, to the end of March, the market was down 8.9%, but we were down only just 1.7%. So again, a 7.2% market outperformance there. So really strong operational performance, strong results last year. Again, acknowledging the support that we have from the government. And all of those sort of key metrics have enabled us to actually have a strong financial start to the year. And as a result of that, actually, we've decided to pay back all of the furlough payments that we've claimed in 2021. And I think most companies will have utilised furlough, particularly in January, because of the level of the pandemic was quite severe. So you'll remember sort of 70,000 cases a day, 2,000 people a day were sadly losing their lives as a result of COVID. So with that strong start, we paid back all of the furlough money. We also paid back retail grants, which applied to non-essential retail businesses, which clearly we are in that category. So it caught a lot of attention. So a lot of media, the Times, the Telegraph, etc., I was on the Sky News, sort of picked up on this news because we're only actually, I believe, the second publicly listed non-essential retailer to have actually done this. So we're really proud that we could do this. And I think it's quite interesting. There's some companies out there who've also done well but haven't chosen to do this, and I think the media sort of picks up on that. There's a lot of sort of commentary around, management bonuses and things like that, and we took a decision not to pay management bonuses. So that sort of picked the headline up for. Unfortunately, we were in the headlines for being, having a strong moral compass, but I guess it's quite topical right now in terms of where people sit on this particular issue.
Yeah, agreed. And Chris, you and I were having a conversation the other day around some of the softer traits and trends that are starting to drive business success in various industries. What are you starting to see emerge, both from sort of customers and from, I suppose, the leadership traits that will drive these modern businesses?
Yeah, so I think a common narrative we hear from a customer perspective is digital, right? We're wanting to engage digitally, from a distance, omni-channel, all of that, and that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, and that's pretty straightforward. I think what's really key is what Daksh just said, which is about business doing the right thing, and there's having a moral compass. And I think some of the consumer behaviors that we're seeing are, loyalty towards brands and a preference towards brands that are actually doing good and doing the right thing. And so, I love the fact that, the performance Daksh talked about, coupled with the decisions they made as a management team on both ends, right? Take that performance and pay back, right? But also, hold back on the management bonuses, which says a lot about a firm. And so I think we'll see consumers, move more towards preferring those brands that are doing the right thing. I think also from a leadership perspective, it's really ending networks and partnerships. So, how can the network perform better collectively as opposed to individually? And then I think the other area where we're seeing businesses outperform is leaders who will set outcomes for the teams to achieve, but not necessarily dictate how they achieve them. So giving their teams some room to experiment and move around and to achieve that outcome in a very flexible and fluid way, which really makes for firms where you want to be an employer of choice, where you're giving people enough guidance to know what they need to do, but enough autonomy to do it in the way that they're best capable of doing it.
Yeah, agreed. And I think sort of open question to the pair of you. I think the type of leadership traits that businesses are required to have at the top end in order to face some of the horizons and the different challenges that businesses are now having to tackle and deal with. But I think there's a better side to it as well, as you mentioned there, around some of the traits that customers are looking for. I mean, the three of us work in the heart of what customers are after. You two have spent a long time working in that space. What do you think the challenges that businesses are going to have to be ready for in the next few years?
I think the first thing I'd say, just in terms of sort of characteristics, not necessarily I think it's just of all management today. You have to be a modern leader. I mean, management, as I see it, I've been a CEO now for 14 years, but I've been a sort of senior leadership sort of C-suite level for 20 years. But makes me sound really old, but I've just clicked 50, so I'm not that old. But I think the interesting thing is, just picking up some of the points that Chris has made there. Customers are seeing this. I mean, we did what we did with not taking management bonuses, even though technically we had earned it. We did the right thing there, and our colleagues saw that because it's all public. Everybody knows what you get paid because it's all in the annual accounts. We did the right thing by paying the furlough money back and the retail grants back, and it's a £4 million sum. It's a significant sum of money. Retailers don't make huge returns. I mean, that for us is about 20% of our full year profit. Just slightly less than about 17% of our full year profit, but it's still a significant sum of money for us. And I think what's been fascinating is the amount of coverage we've had now. That we weren't doing it for I don't need to see my face on Sky News. I'm not really, I don't know. It's not something that why we did it. We did it because we felt it was the right thing to do. And actually, the feedback we've had has been phenomenal, because our colleagues have seen that. Our customers have seen that. I must have had in the last week alone 60 to 70 messages, emails, text messages from our customers saying what a brilliant thing that you've done. And I do think more and more this is something that's important. I think people will notice, are you giving back? And I think we're in an age where, it's that film Wall Street where, Gordon Gekko says greed is good. I think people just don't, excess is just not good. I don't think anybody has a problem with people if they work hard and, earned it, but it's where you see excess or you see things just optically don't sit right. So I think we will benefit from that. So I think some of the characteristics, I also think as an employer, that's really important. So one of the things I'm incredibly proud of is, we've been 11 years in a row ranked as we've achieved a sort of Great Place to Work Institute accreditation. For 7 years in a row, we've been ranked in the UK's best workplaces. We're the number one automotive company in that league table. We're the number one retailer in that league table. So we're really proud of that. But again, I think all of these things are linked. If you have the right culture in the business for your colleagues, that provides good customer outcomes. If you provide good customer outcomes, it's not rocket science. You achieve shareholder satisfaction. I know that sounds really, really basic, but it is true. It's just common sense. I hate using that as an analogy because everybody talks about happy staff equals happy customers equals happy shareholders, but it really is as simple as that. I remember seeing that years ago and thinking, well, that sounds a bit basic, but it really is that basic, But I think what comes with that, picking up your question, Jacob, is around leadership qualities. I think modern leadership, and I would like to think I'm a modern leader in terms of we're very transparent. In fact, this morning we've just had a management conference with around 400 of our management population on that. We get fired questions at live. People can ask that anonymously, so you get the really difficult questions. I think that's really important. But a lot of managers I don't see are leading from the front, and I think that's an important characteristic that I think we look for in our managers. That's for sure. And I think it's really important because ultimately people have choices. People have choices where they want to shop. People have choices where they want to work. And for us, I think it's about that employer brand, and it's also about that customer brand proposition as well.
Yeah, I think you said something really important there, Daksh, about leading from the front. In kind of the concept of serving leadership, it's kind of like blazing the trail, right? And so, a leader who's going to, cut through all the difficulties so that their organization can more fluidly, blaze that trail, right? Move through that path. Authenticity is something you can't manufacture. So I think to your point, consumers, the public, they're pretty clever and they can see through, kind of that a false narrative. So, when it's authentic, they know it, and they gravitate towards it. And so you can't make up, paying back the furlough scheme as a clever way to be positioned in the marketplace. It's really that authenticity. And somebody once said to me, people will always gravitate to their natural state, right? So no matter how much we try to pivot or be something, we're going to gravitate to our natural state. And so, if leaders are authentic, and then the other piece is empathetic and empathy for the employees, for the public at large, especially during the time of the COVID-19 and the pandemic, having an empathy for what's happening at scale. Not just an individual, but for society as a whole. And I think that's where you can only lead if you have followers, and you cannot force people to follow you. And so by blazing that trail, by leading from the front, it gives the rest of the people in the organization kind of the courage and the capacity to follow, not because they're following from a demeaning perspective, but you're setting that example of blazing the trail, of clearing through the brush and the thickets, and they then have permission to do that, and will inevitably find new ideas, new sources of value, different aspects of innovation to bring to the table. And so that a leader really ends up so authenticity, empathy, and then playing more of a role of a facilitator or orchestrating, right? So orchestrating the success of the team, not necessarily being the success of the team or making all of the decisions, but getting the right players in the orchestra, playing the right instrument, hitting all the right notes at the same time in a very coordinated way. I think that's really the key to modern leadership: that authenticity, empathy, and orchestration.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys. And Chris, you and I were having a conversation recently around the success of some businesses and what got a business here won't necessarily get them there. So from the way the business is set up itself outside of the leadership, what sort of trends are you seeing emerge in terms of, I don't know, customer expectations might be the right word. As we said, it's no longer just a product offering. Daksh mentioned people can shop around this competition. What else is out there that people are starting to look at?
Yeah, I mean, so you start to get to a point of parity on a lot of products, right? So if we take the automotive industry, right, there's, Daksh knows better than I, better than most of us, right? Living in this business for so long successfully, that the margin on selling a new car, right, is minimal, and the price differential is minimal from one dealership to another. It's about service, and that playing field is starting to get leveled to a certain degree. Technology is starting to create another wave of differentiation, but it's going to go back to really what I think is that being a business for good. Is this a company I want to do business with? I have a choice in where I place my hard-earned income, and I want to choose to place that with a company I feel good about, that I feel like I'm making a contribution to more than just the product or service I'm getting at this point in time, but that money is going towards the triple bottom line, right? So economic, not just financial, but economic in terms of kind of the broader sense of economic value. Social value is the right thing for society, for my neighborhood, for the village I live in. It's a local business, and then the environment. Are we doing the right thing from an environmental perspective? And I think customers are getting much more selective about where they're going to spend their time and money. And technology has helped them be able to investigate all that. As Daksh said, look, their executive pay and compensation is publicly available. But consumers have a wide range of tools, and so path to purchase has changed, drastically over the last 5 to 8 years, where it's not just product selection. I'm going to go out and I'm going to talk to my friends. I'm going to go out to Twitter and see what other people's experience, or Instagram or TikTok or whatever the platform is today. And so you're constantly being evaluated on much more than just price. And so paying attention to those broader initiatives and that business for good is really, really important, more so now than ever.
And Daksh, you and I had a brief conversation as well, and actually there's been quite a few areas where Marshall's championing that. In that business for good lens and going above and beyond what's required.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I was just listening to Chris, thinking, it's sort of quite reassuring to hear that's his view. I mean, obviously, Chris has the benefit of seeing what other companies are doing, what consumers are saying. So, that's something we're very aligned to. I'd like to think we're one of the good corporate citizens out there. We have a very transparent culture with our customers, with our employees. And I do think there's value in that, and I think people do sit up and look at all of these things. So yeah, it's quite reassuring to listen to Chris's comments, because I think they're absolutely aligned to what we're doing as a business. So really pleased to hear that.
Great. And in terms of sort of self-investment, again, I open floor to both Dash and Chris. I think there's, you can't, if everybody knew what trend was next, right? I think none of us would be on this podcast now. We'd be busy burying away and coming up with the next business idea. But there's definitely some emerging themes that are starting to take place. And you've obviously got the digital lens coming in where people are expecting more, making things more frictionless, making things easier to access. But there's this sort of partnership sharing model around your business plus, really. What else are you attached to? What sort of themes are we going to be looking at if our business was to tackle the next 10 years successfully, do we think?
I think from an automotive perspective, look, I can't think of many other sectors that are being that are going through such significant change. You know, I mean, the automotive industry is going to go through profound change over the next decade. You know, if you look at what the OEMs are having to do in terms of investment on electric vehicles, you know, for them it is quite frankly survival, because if they don't hit those emissions targets, you know, for the good of the planet, quite frankly, they're going to get fined, and if they get fined, they're just not going to survive. So they're in a massive fight for survival right now, and that sounds dramatic, but that's true. You know, they've got to hit those targets. So that requires significant investment. So you will see consolidation, rationalization. So there's a lot going on there, and all of that does have an impact on our business, because ultimately manufacturers are looking at how the distribution chain works, because ultimately they control it. And I guess from our perspective, it's kind of, well, how do we take cost out of our business? How do we make it more efficient? And digitalization has a huge part to play in that. And equally, you know, I think what we've all learned through the pandemic is there are easier ways to do things. There are simpler way of doing things. There are more customer-centric way of doing things. You know, and I think one of the things we're doing, you know, working with Chris, is really looking at strategically what can we do to make the customer journey significantly easier in our organization. Because if you've ever been to buy a car, you know, it's a great experience buying a car, and it's very exciting for people. You know, people always, you know, do it once every sort of 3 or 4 years. It's interesting. I'm sat here in my new house. Actually, we've just completed a new house purchase, and you do it maybe once every 7 or 8 years. So that's quite exciting. But equally, you know, you think about how easy it is to buy a house on Rightmove, which is where we saw this house. Equally, you know, people buy cars and they go on the manufacturer websites or our website or Auto Trader. But the reality is, when you actually come into our showroom, you know, the paperwork process is quite painful for our customers. So what we're looking at is how can we digitalize that process, make it much more easier for our customers to have a simplistic, more simplistic journey that they are having to have today. Now, some of that's difficult to do because we're relying on, we have to complete so many different bits of paper for regulators, for manufacturers, for you know, people who, for example, the DVLA. So it is. You know, it is quite a painful process for our customers, but equally it's a painful process for us as well. So I think you will see the whole journey in the automotive sector change quite significantly, I would suggest, in the next 10 years. So it'd be fascinating to watch this all play out.
Yeah, I think that's you know, it's interesting when you think about the opportunity around, you know, digitization and digitalization. You know, reduce friction in the process. And I think, you know, as Daksh described it, right, it's painful for his organization, it's painful for the customer. And again, back to a business saying, well, all right, how do we relieve that customer pain? And at the same time, it can be a win-win. We can relieve our own pain. And you know, that requires, you know, some thoughts, you know, some thinking. There's always going to be challenges there. But I think the right mindset is not one of, you know, let's present the 10 reasons why we can't do this, but, you know, how do we think more creatively about how we can solve this, and how can we perhaps present solutions and make a compelling case, not just for ourselves, not just for our customers, but also potentially for our suppliers. So there's an opportunity to perhaps, you know, lead. You know, on both the OEM front as well as the retailer front and the customer front on some of these changes. And some organizations are just, you know, it's a little bit of, you know, who blinks first. everybody in the value chain may be making the assumption that the other participants can't do this. But at the same time, they all may be thinking of making similar moves. And so sometimes it's the first person that says, hey, can we do this? And there's almost this sense of relief that goes along. The partners say, oh, we were thinking of something, very similar. It doesn't always work that way, but it can.
Yeah, agreed. And we've been discussing recently around this concept of the business partner ecosystem as well. I know we have conversations with Marshall around what the future holds for that business, particularly within that industry. But as we know, transformation doesn't discriminate. Disruption doesn't discriminate. It's across industry, it's everywhere. And I think some of those larger concepts around the business partner ecosystem, as Dash mentioned there, the customer centricity that's really driving a heart of the change for a lot of what Marshall are looking at for the future as well is really strong. But at the same time, it's not easy, right? And I think some of these leadership traits we've discussed around what will navigate these businesses through these uncertain and difficult times, and that's just the last year. That's not even talking about what's next. Is key and pivotal for that. Chris, I don't know if there's any closing thoughts or trends that you wanted to cover off around some of that business partner ecosystem, what organizations need to look like in order for that to be a success, not just from a leadership perspective, but some of the culture that underpins that from the people that are actually doing a lot of the work.
Yeah, so I think, one of the points you made, Jacob, was around, disruption can come from anywhere, right? So, it used to be, pretty straightforward, right? To figure out who your competitors were, right? So if you're an automotive retailer, you knew who your competitors were, but suddenly different business models pop up that can start to, threaten your very existence. So when you start looking at that, you have to broaden your horizon, broaden your thinking just a little bit, and start thinking about ecosystems. And so, Professor Michael Jacobides out of London Business School, right? Great thought leader on kind of ecosystem strategy. It's about the network effect. So how do you look across the entire network of participants and create new business models to create new sources of value, and that will allow you to either decide on a transformation, or, as we've all learned through the pandemic, being able to pivot is really important, right? And it can be the difference between just surviving or thriving. And so having a portfolio of options you can execute based on none of us can predict the future, but based on a variety of futures that could unfold, give businesses that ability to pivot. And the one last thing I would say is, Daksh said something earlier that I think is, again, so fundamental and so basic, and we all kind of ignore things that are just simple, right? You go back to basics. For some reason, we want to believe it's some framework in some MBA course at some top university that is, the great answer to this complex business problem. And sometimes if we just go back to the basics, the simplest advice is the hardest for us to take, because it's probably something our parents once told us, right? You think about budgeting, right? Everybody goes through the same budget process. Oh, we need to figure out how to reduce cost in our budget. Well, all right, well, I have, a mortgage, a rent, I have my car payment. And then eventually, once you get through your top 2 or 3 things, just stop, right? And the simple advice is, it's never those big things. It's all of those small things, right? It's the Starbucks 3 times a day or twice a day, depending on what it might be. It's the simple advice. It's going back to basics that can create such value. But sometimes it's just so obvious. And we often want complicated solutions because we think, that must be what got us here. So we need something, very, very complex to get us out, when going back to basics can be a tremendous opportunity.
Thanks, Chris. And Dash, I'll sort of throw one at you as well, just to put you on the hot spot. But we've spoken a lot around what's got Marshall to where they are today and the success of last year, and that's down to the people, right? And I know we touched on the sort of investment into people around how you keep people warm, how people associate with the brand, the passion that drives that as well. Have you got any comments around how you've driven such a successful culture, and obviously, and any insights to what that might hold for the future as well?
Look, I think it's a combination of things that we do in the business. So, I think if you were to look at our business in the sector, we've probably been one of the sort of, I don't like to say one of the best, but it's not for me to say, but we've certainly been right up there in terms of, the group that's been, progressive on a number of fronts. So just to give you sort of an indication, we've grown the company. When I joined, we were around 300 million in revenue. We're heading towards 3 billion now. So that is huge growth by any measure. We've been a leading consolidator in the sector. We've grown very acquisitively. As I said, we just completed added another 2 franchises just yesterday. So, that has been a great success story when you look at it on a growth perspective, a revenue perspective. We IPO'd the company in 2014, 2015. For every company that tries to IPO, 6 fail and only 1 get across the line. So we're quite proud of that. And how have we done that? Well, I think there's a combination of things. One, I think having a stable management team makes a big difference. So, we had our AGM last week, as you know, so it was my 14th year. I'm really proud. We had 82% of the shareholders vote, which is a very high turnout. And all 82% who voted for me. So I'm really proud of that. So I think that's it's practically unheard of to have 100% shareholder vote. So 64 million shares that voted. So I'm really proud of that. And I think what really has done that, I think for me, sometimes some companies don't give CEOs enough time to succeed because, more and more boards and remuneration committees and shareholders want it now. They want it yesterday. Don't you think, we all do. We all want transformation quickly, but sometimes people do the wrong things. I think one of the things that's helped me is we always make long-term decisions for the good of the business for the long term. And I think that is one of the reasons why the business is in great shape. So I think long-term stable management team is important. And I think it's not just myself, my whole senior leadership team are long servers. Secondly, it is around culture and your values. Do you really believe them? Part of the reason we did repaid that furlough scheme is because it's around integrity. It was one of our core values. Well, how can you have integrity that says you sat on a pile of cash, which actually you wouldn't have got if it wasn't for the fact that you've got government support, which is why we paid it back. How can you basically, as a CEO, take what would have been a very large 6-figure bonus? How can you take that when you only got there because you obtained government support? And we haven't had to make wholesale redundancies in our organization, but equally, people had a really tough year last year. So that doesn't sit right. It comes down to what's your values, what's your moral compass sit like? Equally, we do live those values. And I think if anything demonstrates that, I think what we've done last week on repayment of furlough, repayment of retail grants back to the government, £4 million, that is, no bonuses taken by the senior leadership team, even though we had earned it, I think shows you the moral compass. Likewise, during the pandemic, we didn't invoke the cap of £2,500, which is what the furlough scheme paid. We paid everybody. We didn't invoke that cap. We enhanced, we did top-ups to the government furlough scheme, and that cost us over £4 million. So collectively, that's £8 million. And in a business that makes £20 million, it's a big chunk of our profit. So I think the values we demonstrate and we live them. I think our culture is demonstrated with the fact that we, as I said, we've been 11 years in a row, great place to work status, 7 years in a row, ranked in the best UK workplaces. I think we have I think that engagement for our colleagues ultimately drives great outcomes for our customers. And guess what? If you have great outcomes for your customers, you have great outcomes, particularly in this industry, which is very much a franchise business. You have great outcomes for our partners, our manufacturer partners, and ultimately that then delivers great outcomes for our shareholders. So I think it's all of those things coming together make a difference. I think the other thing that says we're quite innovative, we're talking about digital. We're a business that doesn't have to be pushed to get stuff done. We want to do stuff. We're very inquisitive. As a management team, we're always pushing. We always want to be better. We always want to stay, one step ahead of our competition, and driving that change is something that we tend to do. So we're quite excited about the transformation the industry is going through. There will be some people who will not be able to make it through this, and I think it will be survival of the fittest. But we feel we're very well placed for the future.
Thanks, Dash. I think if I was ever to script a closing comment, that was very well done. So thank you. Thank you both for joining us today on the CXO
Welcome.
Society show. I appreciate you both making the time.